What if two of the most trusted men in finance, one a billionaire knight, the other a crypto genius, were never who they claimed to be? What if everything they built was a lie, and we helped them build it? This is the true story of Allen Stanford and Sam Bankman-Fried. Two empires, two betrayals, one chilling question: how far would you go to believe in something, even when it's fake? Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening. They rose like legends, one from a Caribbean island, the other from Silicon Valley. Both hailed as financial prodigies, both commanding empires worth billions, and both, as the world would soon discover, were building towers on sand. Allen Stanford was once known as Sir Allen, a Texan banker with a British knighthood and an empire stretching from Antigua to Houston. His company, Stanford Financial Group, promised stability, safety, and elite investment services. At its peak, Stanford International Bank managed over $7 billion in assets. He sponsored cricket tournaments, shook hands with presidents, and claimed to protect wealth better than anyone else in the world. Sam Bankman-Fried, 3 decades younger, didn't wear a suit. He wore cargo shorts, tousled hair, and a t-shirt. Yet by 2021, he was hailed as the golden boy of crypto. His platform, FTX, was valued at $32 billion, backed by celebrities, venture capital giants, and even US lawmakers. SBF, as the world knew him, pledged to donate his fortune to charity under the banner of effective altruism. He wasn't just a CEO, he was the ethical genius tech had been waiting for. On the surface, their worlds were nothing alike. One operated in the realm of traditional offshore banking, the other in the fast, decentralized chaos of cryptocurrency. But both were driven by the same engine, trust, and both used that trust to fuel something far more dangerous than greed. Stanford promised fixed returns through certificates of deposit, returns that were, in truth, fabricated. He paid old investors with the money of new ones in a classic Ponzi scheme. Investigators would later confirm, no real investment portfolio existed. It was a mirage. SBF used FTX customer deposits to bail out his other company, Alameda Research, hiding financial risks while continuing to promote the illusion of solvency. The damage? Over $8 billion in missing customer funds. And unlike Stanford, SBF wasn't dealing with a few thousand wealthy investors. He was dealing with more than 1 million users worldwide. Both men were arrested. Both now face sentences that could stretch beyond a lifetime. But what's more unsettling is this: they were celebrated before they were condemned. They were trusted before they were questioned. And they were believed not despite the warning signs, but sometimes because of them. Why did so many fall for it? What exactly did these men do to manipulate not only money, but perception itself? In the next chapter, we dissect their methods, their psychological profiles, and the inner workings of two of the most calculated financial crimes in modern history. The most dangerous criminals don't look like villains. They don't need masks, guns, or threats. They wear trust like armor, and they use belief as a weapon. Both Allen Stanford and Sam Bankman-Fried understood this, but they wielded it in very different ways. Stanford's fraud was traditional. Textbook, almost. He sold certificates of deposit through Stanford International Bank, promising returns of up to 10%, far higher than any standard US bank at the time. He claimed the money was invested in safe, conservative assets, but there were no such investments. In reality, customer deposits were funding lavish parties, luxury jets, private islands, and, most of all, new deposits to keep the illusion alive. A Ponzi scheme, pure and simple. The architecture of the fraud depended on image, marble offices, sharply dressed advisors, carefully curated reports. Stanford's empire was all about appearances, making people feel like they were part of an elite circle of wealth. And when that illusion cracked, so did the lives of over 30,000 investors across 113 countries. Sam Bankman-Fried used a different playbook. His fraud was wrapped in code, algorithms, and the language of altruism. He didn't just market FTX as a platform, he sold an identity. He painted himself as a quirky genius who drove a Corolla, played League of Legends during investor meetings, and gave away millions to prevent global pandemics. But behind that persona was a complex web of internal loans, backdoor accounting, and undisclosed conflicts of interest. Alameda Research, the hedge fund he also founded, had unrestricted access to FTX customer funds, something no legitimate financial platform would allow. When markets turned against him in 2022 and billions in liabilities surfaced, the house of cards collapsed almost overnight. Psychologically, the two men presented striking contrasts. Stanford craved admiration. He saw himself as a protector of wealth and a titan of finance. He built a cult of personality around his authority, often demanding absolute loyalty from his employees. He didn't just deceive, he dominated. In interviews, he projected charm, control, and unwavering denial, even after being convicted. SBF was more elusive. His motivations were masked by rationalism. He claimed he wasn't trying to get rich, just to do the most good possible. But his behavior revealed something else, a willingness to gamble with other people's money, to override ethical boundaries under the justification of a higher cause. Some experts labeled his thinking as utilitarian extremism, where the ends justify any means, no matter how destructive. His effect was often flat, detached, especially when confronted with the human impact of FTX's downfall. It wasn't arrogance in the traditional sense. It was a cold calculation, as if everything were just a math problem waiting to be solved. In both cases, the method was not simply deception, it was emotional engineering. Stanford used luxury and status to attract trust. SBF used virtue and intellect. And both succeeded for years, not because people were naive, but because the stories they told were exactly what their audiences wanted to hear. One promised safety, the other promised purpose. And while the details differ, the impact was the same. Billions vanished, lives destroyed, systems shaken. In the next chapter, we'll examine just how deep those impacts went, and how the legacy of their crimes still reverberates through financial systems today. We'll also ask the hard question, which of these men posed the greater danger, and why? Not all crimes leave blood on the floor. Some bleed out slowly, through retirement accounts drained dry, through trust broken so deeply it never returns. Allen Stanford and Sam Bankman-Fried were not armed criminals. They didn't use violence, threats, or coercion. Yet the wreckage they left behind was vast, and in some ways, irreversible. Stanford's impact was monumental within the confines of traditional finance. His Ponzi scheme, operating undetected for over a decade, siphoned over $7 billion from more than 30,000 clients. Most of his victims were older individuals, many retired, placing their savings into what they believed were secure, high-yield investments. These weren't high-risk gamblers or crypto enthusiasts. They were teachers, nurses, and grandparents, promised steady income in exchange for trust. When Stanford's empire crumbled in 2009, many of them lost everything. Some committed suicide. Others spent years fighting in court, trying to recover a fraction of what they had lost. The scheme shook the global financial regulatory community and led to renewed scrutiny of offshore banking hubs like Antigua, where Stanford had embedded his operation. But if Stanford's damage was deep, SBF's was wide. At the height of FTX's operations, Sam Bankman-Fried controlled one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world, with over $32 billion in valuation and more than 1 million active users. These users weren't confined to one country or demographic. They spanned continents: young investors in Southeast Asia, developers in Africa, college students in Europe, everyday people in America. Many saw FTX not just as a platform, but as a movement, part of a new financial future where traditional gatekeepers would no longer control access to wealth. And that's precisely what made the collapse so catastrophic. When FTX filed for bankruptcy in November 2022, it didn't just take billions in user funds with it. It triggered a ripple effect that devastated the broader crypto ecosystem. Several other exchanges, lenders, and startups failed in the wake of FTX's implosion. Projects lost funding. Regulations tightened globally. Retail investors fled the market. Confidence in crypto, the very fuel that kept it alive, was drained almost overnight. Experts were divided on who posed the greater threat. Some argued that Stanford's deliberate, long-term manipulation of legal systems and regulators, combined with the sheer duration of his fraud, made him the more dangerous figure. His operation revealed how fragile the global oversight of banking really was, especially in offshore jurisdictions. Others contended that SBF was the more insidious case. His reach extended into Silicon Valley, Capitol Hill, and international media. He wasn't just moving money, he was influencing regulation, shaping public opinion, and positioning himself as a moral leader. He met with lawmakers. He funded political campaigns. He was called the J.P. Morgan of crypto, not by tabloids, but by respected voices in finance. And all the while, he was misappropriating billions. One was old money, the other new tech. One used luxury to manipulate, the other ideals. But both wielded systems, not just systems of finance, but systems of perception. Stanford showed how legacy institutions could be bent by charisma and false authority. SBF showed how modern platforms could be hijacked by a false prophet in sneakers. In measuring damage, it's not just about the money lost, it's about the lessons unlearned, the institutions shaken, the trust violated across generations and borders, and perhaps most dangerous of all, how long it took for anyone to question them. In the final chapter, we'll ask what all of this means going forward. How do we protect ourselves, not just from the next Allen or the next Sam, but from the very human urge to believe what we want to believe? In the end, what Allen Stanford and Sam Bankman-Fried truly stole wasn't just money, it was belief. They dismantled something far more delicate than a bank account or a crypto wallet. They shattered the quiet confidence that people place in systems, in leaders, in the very idea that honesty can coexist with success. Their crimes followed different paths, but reached the same destination: devastation disguised as innovation, betrayal dressed in trust. And perhaps the most unnerving part of all is that they didn't have to try very hard to be believed. Stanford wrapped his fraud in prestige, heritage, and formality. SBF cloaked his in logic, modernity, and moral aspiration. One sold safety, the other sold purpose. People bought both, but this isn't just a story about two men. It's about us, about what we choose to believe and why. It's easy to view their victims as careless or naive, but most of them weren't. Many were educated, cautious, even skeptical, until they weren't. Because the moment someone starts giving you what you've always wanted, whether it's high returns or a higher purpose, you begin to lower your defenses. You stop asking hard questions. You ignore the small inconsistencies. And when the truth finally arrives, it's not just shocking, it's humiliating. Stanford will likely die in prison. His sentence, 110 years. He still maintains his innocence. SBF convicted in 2024, faces a similar fate. His fall was faster, his platform larger, his influence wider. Yet both men will be remembered less for how they lived and more for what they took from the people who trusted them. So what do we learn from this? That regulation alone isn't enough, that intelligence doesn't equal integrity, and that the most dangerous lies aren't shouted, they're whispered gently, wrapped in hope, and delivered by someone who seems like they know what they're doing. There will be more Stanfords, there will be more SBFs, different names, different industries, but the same mechanics of manipulation. And if we don't understand how they work, how they think, we will always be one step behind. The real question isn't how to stop them. The real question is, how do we stop ourselves from wanting to believe them so badly? Because that's the hardest part. Not seeing the con, but admitting that, deep down, we were willing to be fooled. And maybe that's the most expensive lesson of all. 2 men, 2 methods, 1 shared outcome. Broken systems and broken lives. We trusted them because they gave us what we craved: security, meaning, a shortcut to something better. And in return, we gave them power. So now we ask you, between Allen Stanford's old-school Ponzi empire and Sam Bankman-Fried's high-tech crypto collapse, who was truly more dangerous? Let us know what you think in the comments. Do we judge criminals by the damage they do, or the ideals they betray? If you found this story as shocking and thought-provoking as we did, give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep-dive stories that go beyond the headlines, because the next fraudster may already be out there, smiling, promising, building your trust. The question is, will you see it coming?